A phone rings in a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. A transplant coordinator picks up. On the other end, a procurement team in Dallas has a heart. It has been outside the body for 90 minutes. The clock is running. It will not stop. Every year, as approximately 46,000 organ transplants are performed in the United States. Kidneys, livers, hearts, lungs, pancreases, intestines, each one requiring a chain of decisions, logistics, and coordination so precise that a delay of even a few hours can determine whether a patient lives or the organ is lost. This is not medicine. This is logistics at the highest possible stakes. The American organ transplant system is managed by a single national network, the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network, the OPTN. Established by federal law in 1984, the OPTN maintains the national waiting list, sets allocation policies, and coordinates the match between donors and recipients across all 50 states. As of today, more than 100,000 people are on that waiting list. Every 10 minutes, a new name is added, and every day, 17 people die waiting. The process begins with a donor. Most organ donors are individuals who have suffered brain death, typically from traumatic brain injury, stroke, or cardiac arrest, and whose families have consented to donation. When a potential donor is identified at a hospital, yet the hospital is required by law to notify its regional organ procurement organization, the OPO. There are 56 OPOs operating across the United States, each serving a specific geographic region. When the call comes in, an OPO coordinator is dispatched to the hospital, sometimes within the hour. The coordinator's first task is medical evaluation. Which organs are viable for transplant? Blood type, tissue type, organ function, size and weight of the organs, the donor's medical history. Every data point matters, because every data point will be used to find the right match. All that match is made through the OPTN's central computer system, a database that runs matching algorithms against the national waiting list 24 hours a day. The algorithm considers blood type compatibility, geographic distance between donor and recipient hospital, how long the recipient has been on the waiting list, medical urgency, and organ-specific factors, because a kidney can tolerate a longer transport window than a heart. The match list is generated within minutes, and then the calls begin. The OPO coordinator contacts the transplant centers in order, starting at the top of the match list. And each transplant surgeon has a limited window to review the offer and accept or decline. They are evaluating the organ quality, the condition of their patient, whether their surgical team is available, whether their recipient can be reached and prepared in time. If a surgeon declines, the next center on the list is called. This process, offer, review, accept, or decline, repeats down the list until an accepting center is found, all while the clock continues running. Once an organ is accepted, the procurement surgery begins. A surgical team, sometimes flown in from the receiving transplant center, sometimes provided by the donor hospital, performs the procurement procedure. Organs are removed in a specific sequence. Heart and lungs first. They have the shortest viable window. Liver and pancreas next. Kidneys last. They tolerate cold storage longest. Each organ is placed in a sterile preservation solution, packed in ice, sealed in multiple layers of sterile packaging, and placed in a cooler. That cooler has a label, a barcode, a chain of custody document, and a destination. The viable time window for each organ outside the body is fixed and unforgiving. A heart, 4 to 6 hours. Lungs, 4 to 8 hours. Liver, 12 to 24 hours. Kidneys, 24 to 36 hours. These are not guidelines. They are biological deadlines. Miss the window and the organ cannot be used. The transport operation activates the moment procurement is complete. For a heart transplant, the window is so narrow that transport is almost always by air. Charter flights, medical helicopters, in some cases, military aircraft. An OPOs maintain relationships with charter aviation companies specifically for this purpose. Aircraft that can be activated at any hour, any day of the year. The procurement team carries the organ cooler onto the aircraft personally. It does not go into cargo. It stays in the cabin, in the hands of the team. It's at all times. At the receiving hospital, preparations began hours ago. The moment the organ was accepted, the transplant coordinator notified the surgical team. The operating room was scheduled. The recipient was contacted by wherever they were and told to come to the hospital immediately. Yet they may have been at home, at work, asleep. They have been waiting for this call for months, sometimes years. The recipient's preparation runs in parallel with the transport, preoperative blood work, anesthesia preparation, surgical team briefing, or operating room setup. The goal is to have the recipient on the table, ready to receive the organ, at the precise moment the procurement team lands. Not 2 hours before, not 2 hours after. Precisely. The coordination required to achieve this precision involves the donor hospital, the OPO, the OPTN National Computer System, the charter aviation provider, the receiving transplant center, the surgical team, and the anesthesiology team, the transplant coordinator, ground transportation at both ends, all of them operating on the same timeline, all of them accountable to the same clock. When the procurement team lands, a ground transport vehicle is waiting. In some cities, police escorts are coordinated in advance, traffic clearance on critical routes, hospital security notified of the incoming team. The organ cooler moves from the aircraft to the vehicle, to the hospital, to the operating room, in a continuous, unbroken chain of custody. Inside the OR, the transplant surgeon is already working. The recipient's diseased organ has been removed. The surgical field is prepared. The team is waiting. When the cooler arrives in the operating room, it is opened at the surgical table. The organ is inspected, and the transplant begins. The system is designed to be resilient to disruption, weather delays, aircraft mechanical issues, last-minute recipient complications that require the offer to be declined. Every OPO maintains contingency protocols for these scenarios. Backup transport routes. Secondary recipient lists ready to activate. Communication trees that can reach any transplant center in the country within minutes. But the system's greatest challenge is not logistics. It is supply. The number of patients on the waiting list has grown every year. The number of available donors has not kept pace. Yet in 2022, more than 41,000 transplants were performed, a record number. But more than 100,000 people remain on the list, and 17 die every day before a match is found. The OPTN and the OPO network have responded by expanding the definition of a viable donor. A donation after circulatory death, or DCD, has increased the donor pool significantly in recent years. Machine perfusion technology, devices that keep organs functioning outside the body by pumping oxygenated blood through them, is extending viable transport windows beyond what cold storage alone allows. And a heart that once had a 4-hour window can now potentially travel for 6 or more hours on a perfusion device, expanding the geographic range of possible matches. Allocation policy has also evolved. In 2017, a kidney allocation was revised to reduce geographic disparities, ensuring that patients in regions with fewer donors are not systematically disadvantaged. In 2020, heart allocation was updated to better prioritize the sickest patients regardless of where they live. The system is not static. It is continuously refined, driven by outcomes data, yet by equity analysis, by the ongoing reality that demand exceeds supply, and that every policy decision has life and death consequences. What makes the American organ transplant system function, despite the complexity, despite the time pressure, despite the geographic scale, is the infrastructure. A national database running 24 hours a day, 56 OPOs covering every region, transplant coordinators on call every hour of every day, aviation networks ready to mobilize at 3 a.m., surgical teams that can assemble in the middle of the night and operate with precision. and a chain of custody that carries a human organ from one body to another, across hundreds of miles, in a window measured in hours, back in Memphis. It is now 6:18 a.m. The procurement team landed 40 minutes ago. The cooler is in the operating room. The recipient is on the table. The surgeon inspects the organ, nods, and begins. The system held. The clock was beaten. This time. Back. There is a subscribe button below this video. It is a small action, but it helps document the systems that quietly keep millions of people alive. If you are curious about how American healthcare operates behind the scenes, the dispatch networks, the blood banks, the emergency protocols, yes, the supply chains, consider subscribing. And tell us in the comments, are you registered as an organ donor? Did you know the system worked this way?